see that in one version of the meaning of these three terms, one could defend film as philosophy. Now, here the debate has a different turn. The different turn because now it becomes metaphilosophy, meaning what is at stake now when somebody defends film as philosophy is there some idea of what philosophy is or what philosophizing is or how to do proper philosophy. So let me place my bias on the table up front. So this is something I take from John Norton, a philosopher of science who works in the analytical tradition, broadly speaking. This is his guidelines to his students in his course, Philosophy of Science. So it is available in his website, John Norton's website in Pittsburgh University. So Norton writes, the essence of good philosophical writing is attention to thesis and argument. In this regard, professional philosophy is quite distinct from popular view of philosophy as a collection of clever but obscure remarks that no one really understands, and a sad lament that we are surrounded by mysteries transcending our humble grasp. Save this for cocktail parties. Professional philosophers seek to state their claims and their theses in as simple and clear language as possible, and then to establish them with cogent argumentation. This is your goal. So this is his instruction to Norton's students, though I'm not his student in the conventional sense, but what I'm trying to do is something in this line. So one could always disagree regarding this characterization of philosophy, as well as the aim of philosophy and philosophizing. However, this is something that I am trying to do here. So let's be clear about that. Now the debate. The debate has various versions, but it goes uncontroversial to say that cinema, like literature, has more than entertainment value. For instance, social scientists have been paying attention to cinema for various reasons. T.K. Ramendran, for instance, has asserted the resurgence of Hindutva politics in Kerala by studying the films Paitrugam as well as Deshadanam. It's an interesting study from the angle of a social scientist. And interestingly, T.K. Ramendran asks, most people don't understand, don't follow classical music, but most of our heroes somehow sing at least semi-classical songs in their film. Why is it so? Similarly, on a different note, O.B. Rubesh recently used the film Nirmalyam as one of the important sources. And this is a quite interesting move. This is one film, Nirmalyam, is one of the sources along with a poem, Pailopolis Sarpakaval, and a field study. Again, to argue that religion has been a significant strand in modern day Kerala, and that it has interfaced intimately with various secular, progressive, and developmental articulations of this region. There are problems, one could always point out problems in this kind of studies where we mix a poem, a film, and a field study on the same evidential ground. However, the point I want to stress is that cinema has been taken seriously by social scientists. Then, but this is, in a way, this is quite common because those who have followed Professor M.N. Vijayan's interventions in Kerala's literature and culture sphere understands the importance of art as well as literature. For instance, M.N. Vijayan has been in the forefront of employing poetry, as a way to explain social phenomena. And P. Rajivan, in his study, an essay on Professor M.N. Vijayan, stresses this aspect of Professor Vijayan's interventions in Kerala. Why did this person employs too much poetry when he tries to explain something? So one of the reasons that Rajivan points out is that, see, poem or poetry was something that was quite well understood and is quite popular among the mass to which Professor M.N. Vijayan was addressing. So this was a tool, at least, for Vijayan to get to the people. So you interpret Vailopalli Uchangamuda in one way or other and explain that this is how capitalism works. So Vijayan has been doing this. So in a way, cinema has this potential. So you could use it as a tool. You take a sample from a film and use it in order to explain, say, social phenomenon or to illuminate a philosophical position. I usually use scenes from the film Pirates of the Caribbean in my critical thinking class. So in the fourth instance, in the fourth film of that series, Pirates of the Caribbean, one, if you have seen the film, you know this. So that's a dialogue. It was about the hero, Captain Jack Sparrow. It was stated that your words surround you like fog, and it makes hard to see. So I use this as an example of kind of fallacies, convoluted sentences that doesn't make much sense, but it gives us an air of profoundness. So film can be employed for this kind of illumination. One of the more often employed examples, other than unlike this, is the film The Matrix. The Matrix has been used many times by many philosophers in order to argue or in order to exemplify the skeptical scenario. One could say either this is a version of Descartes' evil demon, or one could use the modern incarnation of Descartes' evil demon as the brain in the vat example to show that, okay, what you see is not the case. You know the evil demon case, and you understand readily what the point that the film Matrix is trying to establish. So in all these attempts, we use films or literature for that matter in order to illuminate or explain certain philosophical points. However, this is not what the film as philosophical medium suggests. That this is, however, wants more than this. This is not mere illustration, this is not mere explanation, and this is not film using as a pedagogical tool in a classroom. Rather, there is something more. Livingston, especially Livingston, when he phrased the film as philosophical medium thesis, he calls it the bold thesis, gave us two criterion that are quite central to the thesis that film is a philosophical medium. The criterion can be called as an epistemic criterion and an independence criterion. In the epistemic criterion, the argument is that some, if not all, films not only generate but also justifies the philosophical claim it advances. The crucial weight is given to the term justification. It is not the generation of a thesis, it's not just the illumination of a point. Rather, the film as a artistic medium, it not only generates but also justifies the particular philosophical claim it advances. Along with this, we need another criterion, namely the independence criterion. Aaron Smuts calls this the artistic criterion for a particular reason. The independence criterion states that whatever we establish employing the cinematic medium is unique to that medium. In other ways, this we cannot establish through other mediums. Meaning, whatever we establish employing the cinema cannot be established A, by other art mediums, B, by prosaic argumentation. After phrasing this particular, say, thesis as well as the two criterion, Livingston, in my opinion, gave the formidable challenge to this thesis, film as philosophical medium. The important aspect of that challenge, he phrased it as a dilemma. I will take only the one aspect, the important aspect of that dilemma. It's quite funny. So Livingston asks, later it is called as the problem of paraphrase. If the bold thesis that the film as philosophy thesis is correct, then we must be able to restate the contributions of the philosophical contributions of a film. If we are unable to restate or paraphrase the philosophical content of the film, then there is no way we would accept that philosophical contribution. This is fairly uncontroversial, I guess. But if we accept it in this way, then we face another problem. If we accept FPM only after the paraphrasal, then The philosophical thesis advanced by the film now appears to rest upon the interpretation of the film. Interpretation here means the prosaic, literal interpretation in the form of probably in the form of a review or writing or as an article. Now, if the second is the case, then this goes against FPM's independence criterion, because now whatever we established employing the film can be established independently. So the challenge is two-faced. One, if film, as it was argued, can establish a philosophical position, then we must be able to paraphrase that that position or the philosophical thesis. If we cannot paraphrase the philosophical by paraphrasing it, translating it in the form of an argument or an essay, let's take it in that manner. So if we cannot paraphrase, then we would not. There is no need for us to accept that philosophical position. But if we accept the philosophical position or the philosophical aspect of a film only after the paraphrasal, then this is not independent. The philosophical position is not independent of the paraphrasal. Consequently, we either miss, so we miss the independence criterion. Now, how do we defend against such a charge? Aaron Smart tries to defend the FPM by proposing, as I have suggested earlier, Smart uses an interesting strategy. It's a common strategy among philosophers. You interpret the terms independence, philosophical thinking, and other keywords in a particular way, such that we would be able to defend a weakened version of, at least a weakened version of FPM. For me, I consider FPM as a decisive blow to the problem of paraphrasal as a decisive blow to the thesis that film is a philosophical medium. However, Smart has defended a refined version of FPM by taking recourse to a weakened idea of philosophical contribution. So according to Smart, if we say that an innovative philosophical contribution is one that provides a new idea or a reason to believe in a philosophical position, then we can call it a philosophical contribution. However, the force of Smart's proposal rests upon the way one understands novelty of reason, or what is a novel idea, or what is novel reason. If the appeal to novelty is exclusive to a particular aesthetic or emotional response that a film has on its particular spectator, probably a philosophy professor, then it would become too subjective an account of a novelty as well as reason. So Smart has this solution against the charge of paraphrasal. So he suggests that if there is an innovative philosophical contribution, by innovative philosophical contribution, we mean that the film provides a new reason or a new idea to support a philosophical claim, then we could say that film is a philosophical medium. But the problem here is that this is too subjective, because this depends upon the particular aesthetic experience this particular interpreter has. And the definition of novelty here is too broad that any art form now, this is under charge. So if you follow Aaron Smart's suggestion that novelty of reason or idea, then we will lose the independence criteria, because this seems to be the novelty of reason seems to be dependent upon the particular aesthetic or emotional response a feeling evoked in a particular, say, epistemic agent. Now, if that is the case, yes, this is too subjective and this is too wide. For instance, why should film be a philosophical medium? Why can't Kathakali be a philosophical medium? If this is the argument for novelty, because Kathakali, for a competent spectator, can also evoke similar aesthetic responses, and it is also possible to argue that Kathakali can also then provide novel philosophical reasons for a particular philosophical position. Therefore, if we follow this particular interpretation of the weekend FPM, then Kathakali is also equally a philosophical medium. So I don't know whether people want to accept that. They may accept these for a misplaced generosity regarding arts, but I'm not ready to accept this. However, in the literature, we would see such subjective defense of FPM. For instance, Nancy Boyer writes, this is about the film Fight Club. She has a particular account, interpretation of Fight Club. She writes, this account and understanding are the products not just of my experience of philosophical texts, but also what I have learned from multiple viewing of the film Fight Club. So she argues that whatever she interprets, she provides us in the form of a prosaic text is not a result of her reading of, or not a result only of the reading of philosophical text, but it is generated because of her multiple watching, viewing of the film Fight Club. Her attempt, this is what she calls, is to do a close reading of the film Fight Club and to reveal the intimate relation between passion and reason in terms that appears to have been lifted from the works of two philosophers, namely Plato and Descartes. So the film Fight Club, according to Boyer, seems to portray the competence, the competition between passion and reason as it was discussed by Plato and Descartes. Then she says, she complains basically that this is the modern, the ancient, this is the modern avatar of the ancient debate, discussion regarding the relation between passion and reason. And according to her, both Plato as well as Descartes rejects this primacy or give primacy to reason, but not to passion. It goes like this. Then she complains that even the film portraits like that. But I have no clue why she is bringing Plato and Descartes there, because a better candidate for understanding the relation between passion and reason might be neither Descartes nor Plato, but it might be either Aristotle or Spinoza. So this gives me another important aspect of this film as philosophy club, if one wants to say, like Fight Club. Boyer now appeals to a particular emotive or aesthetic experience she has after watching the film. The problem here is that, unfortunately, this happens to be one chapter in a book on the film Fight Club. And Boyer's attempt at best is a good exercise in interpreting the film, which does not overcome the problem of paraphrasal. Because according to the description of that particular book, namely the Fight Club, now I'm talking about the book, that book, according to the self-description, meaning you get that in the cover, that this is a book or first book that attempts to philosophize the film Fight Club. And this is an excellent vindication of the problem of paraphrasal, because if we go by the description of the book, we will find people exploring various philosophical aspects of the particular film. However, it ended up providing us 7 different accounts of the film, meaning 7 different takes on the film Fight Club. Why 7? Because there is only 7 authors. Had there been more authors, we could have read more philosophy of the film Fight Club than what is already presented there. Now, it is conceivable, minimally it is conceivable that suppose we had one more author who was invited but couldn't write a paper on Fight Club. So it is quite conceivable that the unwritten philosophical take on the film Fight Club might go against some of the already presented, already written theses on the film Fight Club. Means, at least this may make 2 of them incoherent. This is not a problem as such. I will go to the problem of such incoherence in the later part. But the point is that now Boyer is appealing to her subjective experience of watching that film as a reason to argue for independence criterion for philosophy, sorry, film as philosophy thesis. But now, A, this is highly subjective. B, this is highly dependent upon the interpretation. The book itself is a vindication of this particular problem of paraphrasal, because now we have 7 maybe related but independent philosophical exercises on the film. Now what we do? This is in a way a decisive blow But there is one move that is available to the defenders of philosophy, film as philosophy thesis. That is, compare films with thought experiments. In a thought experiment, this is Wartenberg again when he defends his FPM thesis. He writes, in a thought experiment, the reader is instructed to consider a certain possibility that might not have considered before. So in order to make this part clear, let me give an example from another well-known thought experiment from the history of science. So this is Galileo, long back. So in Galileo's period, early modern period, just believe that bodies move, motion of bodies is related to the weight of the body, especially when they fall, and is inversely proportional to the resistance offered by the particular medium. That was the Aristotelian understanding of that period. Then Galileo asked us to consider that we are now just dropping two objects, W1 and W2, where W1 is heavier than W2. So naturally, this would happen. The heavier object would move faster. Imagine you dropping a feather and a stone. Then Galileo makes an ingenious move. He asks us to imagine that we are tying these two things together, W1 and W2. Now we tie them together with a string and we are dropping it. What will happen? According to the Aristotelian theory, we know that when we tie these two things together, the total weight is greater than any of them considered independently. So when we tie these two things together, it should move faster. Meaning these two things together will move faster than W1 alone. So far, so good. But there's a problem here. Even though we tie these two things together, W1 and W2, W2 is a different object. And W2 has a different speed. In the Galileo's period, they call it the natural speed of W2. And that is determined by the constitution of this particular object. Hence, whatever you do, since W2 is an independent object, this would move slowly. Consequently, when we tie these two things together, the W2 would drag W1. Meaning, when we tie these two things together, this would move slowly than W1. Now, that's a interesting result, because when we tie two things together, it both moves slowly and fastly than when they are alone. Meaning we get a contradiction from the Aristotelian theory of motion. Therefore, Galileo suggested that things should, in order to avoid this contradiction, Galileo suggested that when free fall, things move with the same speed. Now, the important parts of this thought experiment, like Wartenberg suggests, is that we do not do anything with our hand. We have no intervention in the world. We do not do any intervention. Everything happens in our head. However, we seem to know something about the world just by thinking. This is, in a way, it's a classic case of a thought experiment. Now, consider the argument for comparing thought experiments with feeling. This is a paraphrasal of the argument provided by David Davis. So films, just like a thought experiment, can also be considered as a fictional scenario which we execute in our head. So the argument is the following. Following a thought experiment is to become a vicarious participant in the experimental aspect of the narrative provided. So Galileo gives us a prosaic narrative of the situation. So we follow that narrative in our head. So when a thought experiment is successful, it makes its conclusion forceful by convincing us the inevitability of that, because we have gone through the narrative and we simulate it in our head. Films work in a similar manner. They make the viewer a vicarious participant in a fictional narrative. Like a thought experiment, the audience of a film is led to the climax by emotionally participating in the cinematic event. So film can be compared to thought experiments. The participants of a thought experiments are made vicarious followers in the unfolding of a hypothetical scenarios. And there is no principled objection to say that we cannot do this in a film, or we cannot do this only for a short period. Galileo's thought experiment maybe last for 5 minutes at best, but a film at least lasts for 1.5 hours. But there is no principled reason to suggest that thought experiments cannot be done for a long period. Meaning we cannot, there is no principled objection that we cannot run a thought experiment in our head for more than an hour or so. Therefore, if thought experiments are capable of producing knowledge, then films are also capable of producing knowledge. And if you compare now, then consider films as thought experiments on screen, then we can suggest that since thought experiments are capable of producing knowledge and producing not only scientific knowledge but also philosophical knowledge, therefore films can also produce philosophical as well as scientific knowledge. Therefore, FPM, film as a philosophical medium, can be defended because now film is a thought experiment. Most defenders of FPM subscribe to one version of one or other version of this particular argument, that films or cinema is a thought experiment in one way or other. Only thing is that it's a prolonged, extended thought experiment. Here, we should note that the argument favoring the capacity of thought experiment begins with a non-controversial idea that thought experiments work with hypothetical scenarios or fictional scenarios, and we do not intervene in the world in the case of a thought experimentation. It is also accepted largely by philosophers that thought experiments can produce knowledge. And if you look at the history of science, we would see plenty of thought experiments. You should take the word plenty with a pinch of salt. There are considerable number of thought experiments that have played very important role in the development of a theory. For instance, Einstein's 1905 paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, which gave us the first glimpses into, which was the paper that gave us the special theory of relativity, begin with a thought experiment. So there are more than one instances where thought experiments played important role in the adjudication of theory. So thought experiments do play a big role in science. Similar is the case in philosophy. In philosophy, sometimes philosophers consider thought experiments as counterexamples. The best known, I think, is the Gettier problem, which some people consider as a counterexample. Some people call it as a thought experiment. So let's consider it as a thought experiment. Then philosophers, it's evident that philosophers employ thought experiments to produce knowledge. And there is Descartes' evil demon. Modern version is the brain in a vat, and the cinematic version is the matrix. So there is a compelling argument here that film and thought experiments are comparable. Therefore, now thought experiments give us a defense of the thesis film as philosophy. Another important aspect of thought experimentation is that in most cases we cannot realize them in a laboratory. Just like the matrix scenario. We are not going to get the matrix scenario, the scenario in the film matrix, anywhere soon, I guess. Just like in the case of a thought experiment. But like a thought experiment, which even when there are philosophers who argue, like Nansen assertion, that even when there are instances of thought experiment that we can conduct in a laboratory, it's possible to convert it into an experiment, but people usually do not conduct such experiment because, according to an assertion, the argument, the conclusion provided by thought experiments are so compelling. It means the objection that film is too dramatic, therefore we cannot accept the conclusion, philosophical point that is made by the film, just because it is far-fetched, it is far away from real life, is not an argument. However, I find more than one objections to this particular argument. At least 4 objections to the comparison between thought experiments and film. First, I call the problem of interpretation. This is very simple. The most pressing problem is the problem of interpretation, the challenge to comparing thought experiment and feelings. This is in a way a corollary of the problem of paraphrasal. It goes like this. The philosophical explanation of a film is determined by its paraphrasal and interpretation given to it by the competent reader. For instance, consider again the film metrics. There is a book one book exclusively for this particular film, the philosophy of the film metrics. And it also indicates in a way my objection, the problem of interpretation, or Livingston's objection, the problem of paraphrasal. And here I would, in a way, maybe for the first time in my life, I found Zizek compelling. Zizek, in his piece on the film metrics, titled, interestingly, for the Zizekian manner, the metrics or the two sides of perversion. Two sides of perversion. This is in the book, The Metrics and Philosophy. So Zizek gives very interesting, he opens the book like chapter like this. So he is giving an start from his experience of watching the film. So there was someone who sits along with Zizek and he shouts, "Oh my God, wow, there is no reality." A kid who was in his late 20s watching the film. Then Zizek makes this interesting suggestion. I definitely prefer such naive immersion to the pseudo sophisticated intellectual readings which project refined philosophical or psychoanalytical conceptual distinction onto the film. I surprised myself that I agree with Zizek there. Zizek's point is very simple because he suggests that people interpret the film metrics whatever way they want to interpret. So later he writes, the Lacanians see the Lacanian picture of like Lacanian view there. The Marxists find the capitalist issues there in the film metrics. Goes on like that. So this is the charge, in a way, objection of interpretation. Now consider the film metrics as a thought experiment. Now, what is the conclusion that one could draw from this particular film? Compare this with a well-known thought experiment with a long history. I don't have time to explain the thought experiment. This is a thought experiment from thermodynamics, namely Maxwell's demon. It got a history of more than 150 years, and it also received 5 to 6 responses. We can classify the total responses into 5 to 6 camps. But each camp, when they responded, they agree upon one thing, that the main point, the central point that this particular thought experiment, Maxwell's demon, posits is that it is possible to violate second law of thermodynamics. Or in other way, simply put, it is possible to extract work, energy without putting work. In other way, there is a possibility to construct a perpetual motion machine. So this was the conclusion of this particular thought experiment. And whomsoever responded to the thought experiment, it has a history of fascinating history of over 150 years. And it has gone through different transformations. The thought experiment has gone through different transformations. But everyone agrees that this is the challenge. Now, think about metrics. Just like Zizek suggested, people interpreted it in the way they want to interpret because they have a specific philosophical point to make. The second objection is the problem of non-failure. Now, history of science suggests that thought experiments fail. I'm not sure about philosophical thought experiments, but thought experiments in science fail. They can fail, and some of them have failed. They fail for various reasons. One of the easiest or the simplest way in which or the trivial way in which a thought experiment failed is by undermining certain theoretical aspects. When we examine the debate between Niels Bohr and Einstein, there was a famous thought experiment proposed by Einstein. Then once Bohr pointed out there is a mistake because Einstein forgot to incorporate relativity theory while considering the consequences, Einstein accepted that the thought experiment is a failure. Though some philosophers like Karl Popper didn't accept that the thought experiment is a failure, he has a different argument. But the point is, thought experiments in science at least can fail. But is it possible for a film to fail if we consider it as a thought experiment? I don't think that it is, the characterization of failure is even applicable to an artwork in a trivial manner. Films may fail in the box office, but that is not what I mean. The third and the most pressing problem regarding the comparison between thought experiments and film is confirmation bias. Because the philosophers they try to defend FPM by comparing thought experiment films with thought experiments rely upon the debate on thought experiments in philosophy of science. So David Davis, for instance, makes this quite explicit. So he draws it from the debate on thought experiments. But the problem is that whenever they want to defend this particular FPM by comparing thought experiment with film or film with thought experiment, they select those account of thought experiments that suits this particular claim. Interestingly, in philosophy of science, you would get at least 5 accounts, epistemological accounts of thought experiments, meaning how thought experiments work. There is this deflationist view called, or the argument view by John Norton, who argues that thought experiments are nothing fancy, they are picturesque as arguments in this case. He also makes this challenge that any thought experiment can be translated into the form of a prosaic argument, meaning step-by-step procedures. He doesn't suggest that this is deductive or inductive, but he says that you can have a mix of deduction and induction or even abduction. But thought experiments are nothing fancy, but they are just arguments. Then we get a Platonistic account where some thought experiments are supposed to have to provide a Platonic view to the laws of nature. Then there is the mental model account, which considers thought experiments as a narrative that enables models in our brain in which we simulate the target object and reaches a conclusion. Then there is experimentalism, which that group argues thought experiments are limiting cases of experiments. And finally, fictionalism by that is Nancy Cartwright, not Nurse. For her, thought experiments are stories with a moral. Now, you have 5 competing accounts of thought experiments, and what our philosophers of film take is that they completely disregard Norton's deflationism. They would either go for fictionalism, but I haven't seen anyone explicitly arguing for that except David Davis. Others usually side with some cognitive accounts, especially the mental model group, not the experimentalistic camp. Now, this is clear-cut confirmation bias. Except Noel Carroll, no one has in a way meaningfully engaged with Norton's challenge. Though Carroll didn't make that argument quite explicit, that John Norton in his deflationist account of thought experiments argued that thought experiments are prosaic arguments. Now, if thought experiments are mere prosaic arguments, then if you say film is a thought experiment, then film becomes a prosaic argument. At least the philosophical contribution of film becomes prosaic argument. Doesn't make much sense, meaning FPM then will fail. But even if we disregard, so this is there is some bias in my part because I am giving more weight to Norton. Suppose that since there is no no agreement upon the nature of thought experiment in philosophy of science, let's give them equal weightage. That all the accounts got their plus and minus. That means this is not a charge against the comparison between film and thought experiment because they can prefer whatever account they want. But whatever account one prefer, one has to answer one pressing question that was raised by, again, John Norton. Norton in his account pointed out that if we consider thought experiments as non-arguments, then we have to answer the following. It is always possible, in science at least, that one could construe thought experiments in such a way that will contradict the conclusion of another thought experiment. Meaning there are 2 thought experiments, they contradict each other, meaning their conclusion contradict each other. He calls it the thought experiment anti-thought experiment pair. Now, if this is possible, and Norton has shown that this is possible, then what would be the role of film when we consider it as a thought experiment? How would a film respond to an anti-film? So, in anti-film by anti-film means a thought experiment that is anti-thought experiment, like the thought experiment, anti-thought experiment film. So, one film, let's say the matrix has provided us one particular conclusion, So it's conceivable that there is another film that gives an opposite conclusion of that of this particular thought experiment, say the matrix. Now, what would we do? The account of film as a thought experiment has now a duty to explain this TE anti-TE pair. But I haven't seen any such attempts from the defenders of FPM. So it is safe to conclude that this move, that film as a thought experiment, can save this particular suggestion that film can be a philosophical medium. Now, I'm not rejecting that film has the potential to evoke theses or to illustrate a point. I'm also not denying that films got cognitive value. There are philosophers who reject that view. So part of the reason for calling thought experiments to the aid of FPM is to show that films got cognitive value. I don't think that you need to call films a thought experiment in order to say that films are having cognitive value. Cognitive value means they can teach us about the world. And since films are mostly about social society, so it is easily conceivable. It's acceptable that they have a cognitive value just like art, because when they talk about the society, you can learn from the art by emotively following particular art. Film do give us that opportunity. However, this is no reason to call that films are exclusively philosophical medium, at least some films. So let me conclude. There are two reasons, two pressing reasons. One, the problem of paraphrasal, that if they are philosophical medium, then one has to paraphrase it. If we accept it only by paraphrasal, then there is no exclusivity to film as a philosophical medium. Now, if we weaken this thesis by saying that there are we only need some novel reasons extracted from the film to call them philosophical medium, then that has the pressing problem that it is it's both too subjective and too wide. Then everything becomes a philosophical medium. For instance, I had that example in the paper that if you remember the old 2013 ad of Havells fan. In the advertisement, we see a husband and wife. They are doing a registered marriage, and the officiating lady, she's writing their name. I mean, they're registering the marriage. Then she says, the official says that, okay, now you will change your name to something. Something means, so usually in India, people change their second name once they get married, second name to that of husband's name. But in the advertisement, the husband, the male person, the male says, no, I'm going to change my name to her second name. Interestingly, that is an interesting feministic perspective, but this is an ad of a fan. Now, if this is what we need from a film to call it philosophical, because this particular advertisement in less than 1 minute makes this position quite clear. The tension in the patriarchal society when a lady gets married, and so on and so forth. Unless someone objects that feminism is a philosophy, one has to concede, if we weaken the FPM too much, that this advertisement is highly philosophical. So I do not think that the FPM group wants to concede that even advertisements, Kathakali, dance, art, everything is philosophical. Then the FPM becomes quite trivial. Okay, I stop here. Thank you so much for your patience, and thanks again.